Recording. Okay. Um, 2 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to thank everyone for joining here today. I know it's a crazy, crazy week, with it being, especially for retailers, with it being Thanksgiving, a short week for many folks, especially here in the US, and some of the biggest online shopping days of the year here this upcoming weekend and beginning part of next week. So thanks for taking the time out to join our webinar here today. We will be going through improving user experience with tag management. I'll be going through what that means, how tags are or can affect user experience on the site, and how a really robust and locked down tag management process, as well as tag management policy, can really help in shoring up a lot of those different things and really helping you to improve the user experience on your website, both through the use of the analytics platforms, complete data collection, as well as solid tag governance to keep trust of your users, as well as to keep everything clean and improve performance of the website. So to start here, just our general housekeeping items, just about Tag Inspector, our tool, and your presenter, who is myself, Lucas. Tag Inspector is a product of InfoTrust LLC. Tag Inspector is a tool for tag auditing and ongoing tag monitoring to help with data collection validation, identification of what tags, what platforms are on your site, where they are, how they're loading, and then the ability to monitor that deployment moving forward so you can keep everything up to date and keep everything under wraps in terms of the control and following your tag policy. On the InfoTrust side of things, we do web analytics, tag management, and product development work, working with over 2,000 different sites annually and doing a number of different training programs, formal training programs, in addition to these webinars. A couple different offices, and then your presenter, myself, Lucas. I am the product manager for Tag Inspector, and I also do a lot of tag management consulting work for clients. As we go through this today, if you have any questions at all, on the right side, typically of your screen, you'll see a little question pane. Feel free to drop any questions as they come up in there, and I will get to those at the end, reading through those. If we run out of time, or if later today you're thinking about something, or later this week you're thinking about something and have a question, feel free to, as always, reach out to me directly. More than happy to answer anything or help out in any way possible. Perfect. Let's get started. As far as the agenda and just the overview of what we're going to be going through here today, how tags first are and can affect user behavior on the site, both from how they affect site performance, so user experience, I guess I should say. So how they affect site performance, which is a very direct way of user experience being affected by those tags. A lot of people in the industry will always cite, I know it was about 10 years ago, but Amazon back in 2006 did a study showing that around 100 milliseconds of latency or of additional time for a page to load contributed to around a 1% drop in revenue and drop in conversions. So very, very significant when it comes to the performance of the website and how that can affect your bottom line and the effectiveness of the website overall. More recently, Forrester did a study showing not quite as large of an issue, but for every 1 second of additional page latency, that contributed to around a 7% drop in overall conversions. And that's across both e-commerce sites as well as across content or lead generation sites. So site performance is huge when it comes to user experience. And we're going to look at how those tags can affect site performance a little bit and how cleaning those up and keeping a good grasp on them can help you maintain good site performance and even improve as you're going through like an audit and cleanup process. We'll also look at some of the ways that you're optimizing your site for user experience when it comes to analytics. Ideally, you're using your analytics platform and the data collected to really inform all of the marketing decisions, content decisions, design decisions on the website. So we'll look at how tags play into that role, as well as some of the other different types of platforms that you can use. Seen a lot of emphasis this past year on personalization engines, personalization tools, as well as testing tools for multivariate tests, as well as A/B testing different elements on a page, messaging, as well as full layouts of pages. So we'll look at how tags are playing in that ecosystem, and how, again, solid tag management can help, one, get reliable results and reliable actions out of those things, as well as can make sure that you're getting your full investment in the different platforms that you're working with. We'll then cover user trust, so how data leakage issues, one, can follow your users around and give you a bad rap when it comes to advertising issues and almost getting to that creepy point in advertising and personalization, as well as just in general making sure that your data is secure, your user data is secure, so obviously your users can trust you, that it's not being shared, not being sold in any way, but also so that you can keep that locked down. You're investing a lot of money regardless of the end goal of the website, but you're investing a lot of money in traffic. You're investing a lot of money in those users, both in building the site, optimizing the site, as well as attracting visitors and users to the site. So you don't want that information about the different users and about the different use cases that you're gleaning from the site to be lost due to a poor tag architecture and not solid governance. Finally, we'll go through how to accomplish some of these different things. I know we've gone through in past webinars quite a bit around tag auditing, creating a tag governance process, creating ongoing monitoring and validation. We'll go through some of those different strategies here at the end as well, just to reiterate and to show how these different aspects that are affecting user experience on your site can really be addressed and can be taken on when it comes to that tag management process and those policies. So with that, we will get into it. The first piece here, just as far as the overview goes, a lot of different factors are affecting user experience on your website. How tags are working and how all those different platforms are working is really the basis of all of those different marketing platforms, personalization platforms, testing platforms that you're running on your website. They're necessary and they have to be there in order for you to get the most out of your investment in the website. But the actual tags and the data that's being collected can have a lot of different effects on the site and on the experience. So we'll get into, like I mentioned, the importance of tag management. I thought this graphic was great as I was going through, just looking at design and the different elements that users of the site are going to be interacting with. And I found it funny, as soon as I started to scroll, up popped a chat pane that was taking over the window. Every single time I would close it out, it would jump back up. And I was like, this content is great. This visual is great. A lot of this things are great. And it's true on a lot of different sites. But you'll have an element, or you'll be running a platform while the intention is good, that it is driving people away, causing people not to dig further into the site. That was a perfect example of it right there. Now, when it comes to tags, one, obviously that's functioning with the JavaScript tag that you would be placing on the website. But we'll see sometimes with clients as well, where you might have elements that are writing something to the page or showing a visual element on the page that are maybe not loading in the way that they're supposed to. So that can really cause a major issue on the site. Maybe it's not functioning as it should. I mean, I'm sure that chat window wasn't supposed to keep popping up on me every single time I closed it down. So that could be an issue with the script, which, as from the tag management perspective, could fall under your purview. But also we'll see instances where platforms like that might be piggybacking off of another tag, or loading through a container that's being managed by one of the different partners that you're working with. In instances like that, and even if it's on just one page, there's some sort of a visual element that's interrupting the user's experience and the user's journey on the website that you might not even have visualization or visibility into, which again underscores that need for that really good governance process and visibility into the site at all times. So the first part, like I mentioned, that we'll go through here is site performance. Now, site performance, there's a ton of different factors that are going into how your page is performing. Everything from on the site side with the servers. So how many concurrent connections can the server hold? You can run into different latency issues because there's so many users on an individual site. The site servers can't hold that many concurrent users or users at the same time. So as you're trying to connect and pull down content, it's unable to respond. So that's one piece, not really related to tags. And there are many more similar to that. Just the server performance in general, size of data being sent, size of the content and everything that's written onto the website. But when it comes to from a user perspective and how the tags and how pixels are playing into that overall process, we're looking at more on the user side. So every single user obviously is using a browser to render your website. Each user has different characteristics. They're using different machines. They have different levels of CPU available on those different machines. The bandwidth for how they're connected to the internet is varies quite a bit. And all of these different things add together to potentially cause a pretty big limitation for how quickly your user and your user's machine and browser can access the internet. So again, a very broad generalization, but I always like the traffic example here. Obviously, you have all of these different cars, all these different people trying to get to one single place. But due to construction, issues with the road, just limitations of the road in general, it becomes a bottleneck. And that's the way I like to think about network requests and data that's flowing to and from the website. So there's the critical pieces of content, obviously the actual content of a page, the different creative that's on that page, the things that you're putting on the website. In addition, you have your JavaScript tags that are loading, potentially calling in additional content, sending up information to different servers in the context of analytics. Maybe it's calling in from one of its servers an additional JavaScript packet to be able to execute and run more functionality on the website. It really depends on what the platform is, how exactly it's executing, how it's working for what it's doing. But regardless of that, it's still sending and receiving requests. And similar to that traffic visualization right there, there's a limited amount that can get through either way at one given time. In some instances, it might be a 10-lane highway just due to the site that you're working with, the user. But in other instances, it might be something where it is just one lane. So the more requests you have, the more weight, the more data that's being sent from the page being called down, the more that has to get through. And the more the potential is there for latency issues due to a lot of those different requests and just the CPU usage that's necessary when it comes to executing all those different platforms and those tags in addition to the content that you're placing on the site. So what does this mean? What does this mean in the context of the tags effect? Like I mentioned, more weight, more load on the user's machine and browser. it can really, really affect that. So from a visibility perspective, and what we need to keep in mind is for management of the different platforms, we need to get rid of anything that's not in use, any sort of legacy tags, or anything that shouldn't be there. Now, the most egregious examples of this are tags piggybacking. So if it's an unauthorized third party that's loading through another third party on your website that shouldn't be there, not only is it a potential security risk, but it's also performance risk. Potentially, that's just additional weight that's being added to the site and added to the load. It needs to be removed. If it's something that maybe it's a legacy platform, someone in marketing was using one particular tool for A/B testing a year and a half ago. We're no longer using that platform, moved on to something else, investing in another solution. And while, yes, you might not be paying for that service anymore, or actually doing anything with that service on the website, with the tag still being there and requests still being sent, again, there is that tax, there is that additional weight on for users as they're using the page. So it underscores the need for that really solid tag governance process. We need to make sure that unauthorized tags aren't there. We need to make sure that we have visibility into all the different tags and platforms loading on the site. And ideally, when going through an audit, we need to see what type of requests, how large those requests are, what is the response time, is it something that's loading synchronously and blocking other things on the page from loading? Is it maybe blocking other JavaScript from rendering properly? We need to have visibility into all those things, and that comes with that tag management process. Being able to do some automated work to continuously audit, and then once we have everything cleaned up and we know we're in a good place to monitor moving forward, which we'll get to, but to monitoring moving forward to make sure none of those potential ills are again being introduced into the site. Again, for performance, it's a huge bear, and I would love to get deeper into tag-specific effects on the sites and how exactly that works. And we're planning on organizing a webinar solely around that idea. We get asked about it all the time, but solely around that idea here in the future. But high level, additional tags, things that aren't necessary, they need to go, and they need to be better managed when it comes to tag management and governance. The second piece here is optimization through the use of web analytics and optimizing the site with analytics. Now, it doesn't matter what tool is being used. A lot of people are using, obviously, Google Analytics, Adobe, Web Trends. So people now starting to use tools like Snowplow. But we use the web analytics platforms to make decisions on the site. It's how we are identifying how users are being acquired, where they're coming from, what their behavior is on the site. So what content they're consuming, how they're following a different funnel to a purchase, what sorts of things they're interested in, who they are. So we can make those segments and get that demographic type information about our users, as well as obviously all that conversion information that's coming from our analytics platforms. All of this adds up to everything we're doing with the website and how we're trying to optimize the website, both through offering better content, targeting the right people, putting our marketing out there in the right places so we're attracting the right audience. All of that's informed by the web analytics platform. We're defining our marketing strategy, how we are crafting our landing pages, where we're placing the calls to action, what type of content we're putting on the landing pages, what the main themes are, what we're featuring in on those pages and on those site sections in relation to where we're putting ads that are leading there. So getting into your media strategy. It's all predicated on having complete and accurate data flowing into our web analytics platforms. Web analytics and other marketing platforms are no different. And then on the website, they are reliant on the JavaScript tags that you're placing on the site, as well as other elements that fall under that tag management scope. So, sorry about that. So it's imperative when it comes to these different platforms that we have complete coverage across the site, that we're collecting complete and accurate data all the time in all instances on the site, and that our tags are in the right place and formulated properly. So tags are, and the management of those are extremely important here as well. We need to be able to document what data should be collected, is required to be collected, on what pages, for what users, all that type of information going into that tag management process and that policy. And we need to be able to have visibility into as soon as something like that breaks. Because if we don't, we're then in a situation where, even if my Google Analytics tag is missing from 20% of my landing pages, or I'm not tracking just a handful of different events, those are potentially driving the most traffic, driving the most conversions. Or if I don't have complete data in like an A/B test that I'm running within, if I'm collecting that information with Google Analytics, I'm not making decisions and I'm not allocating budget to places that are optimal. So it starts to really cause issues in that decision-making process. And at the end of the day, in that bottom line, due to the foundation of the data collection not being there and not being accurate, which is my tag deployment. This is also true with other types of tools and platforms, personalization and testing. And when we're talking about these, I threw this in here just because it's been a really popular topic over the past year or so. A/B testing tools, obviously Google in the last couple months came out with Google Optimize in their 360 suite, which is interesting. They're getting into the A/B testing area. Optimizely is something that's out there and very, very popular. On the personalization side of things, tools like Rich Relevance and even LivePerson, some of those different chat type apps. But again, all of these different tools are dependent upon that foundation and that architecture that you're putting together for the tagging. If Optimizely is missing from a page, or if the caveat with tools like an A/B testing tool that are affecting and manipulating the actual content of the page and of the website, if it's loading in the wrong way, if you have it loading through, for example, Optimizely, until recently, it's still not fully tested, but it couldn't be loaded through Google Tag Manager because Google Tag Manager is loading asynchronously. Optimizely needs to block everything so it can change the content of the page. So if you were trying to load Optimizely through Google Tag Manager, it would cause a noticeable flicker on the screen, a noticeable change on the screen, which obviously then is negatively affecting that user experience on the site. So caveats such as that we need to know and we need to have documented, and that goes into how tags are required to load. But also we need to know that these different platforms that we're investing in are properly deployed and properly functioning across every single page that they should be on. So a big part of that is knowing where they should be, knowing what they should be doing, and knowing how they should be doing it. This is a visualization that I'm sure a lot of people have seen. Every year, this gets put out there. chiefmartech.com is the site that it typically comes from. But it's every single digital marketing platform, marketing technology out there, all put in a visual. And these are different areas, advertising, promotion, content and experience, social and relationships, data, etc. And then smaller, more subcategories for optimization, personalization testing, apps, content, analytics, visualization. So many different tools out there, so many choices, so many people offering free trials that you might have one or two people in the marketing department that are like, hey, yeah, I want to try that. We need to implement that on the site. This alone really underscores the need for control over that process. If you let the site become just the wild, wild west, and especially now if you're using a tag management system where it's very easy for even non-developers to deploy tags outside of the development process, if there isn't that control on a lot of these different items, it becomes the wild, wild west. And it becomes just a lot of different platforms being shot out there, things not being removed from the site, not being managed properly, not being deployed as they should be or loading as they should be. We get into those issues that we talked about with latency, performance issues on the site, with security issues on the site where we have data leaking or data going to unauthorized third parties. We have issues where I might have so many different tools on there that are potentially blocking other JavaScript, so I'm having gaps in analytics collection, even though my tags are there on the page, but because they're loading after so many other things, those requests aren't able to go up by the time a user leaves that particular page. So the sheer reality and the sheer environment that we live in, with so many different tools out there, so many different things you can place on your site, and so many options, which on one hand are great, but on the other hand, it poses a risk to user experience, to tag governance, and security performance in general. So keep an eye out, and really we need to refine and manage this process. That visualization and I guess that little soapbox speech that I just gave really leads us to the user trust item. And we come across this a lot. So users, it's implicit. And in many cases, especially if you have a site in Europe, it is explicit that users are saying that I trust you enough to not use my data in a way that's going to be detrimental to me, either from an experience standpoint as well as a security privacy standpoint, to opt into this particular type of tracking, or in the US, not opt out of this particular type of tracking by using an ad blocker or turning JavaScript off in my browser, that sort of thing. But they're trusting the site, and they're trusting you as someone that's managing the different tags and managing the platforms on the site to do right by them, to not have unauthorized tags or unauthorized or any third parties really on the site that are collecting information to then turn around and sell it to another partner so that they can then be targeted down the road. And that's where we really get into some of the creepy advertising, creeping ads. I hear all the time, like, it's weird. I go to a site and then I go somewhere else, and all of a sudden I'm seeing advertising for a product that I looked at. Well, it's even weirder when no one else is using my personal computer and I go to a particular site, I look at a pair of shoes, and the next thing I know, I'm seeing, you know, photos of hats, things like that being remarketed to me from a website that I was just on. Now, in some cases, that might be predictive analytics. This many people look at these many shoes, and that's a combo purchase sort of thing. But a lot of times, it's an issue with just the tagging. It might be an issue with an individual variable or a value that's being collected going up. It might be an issue of we're running remarketing ads, but we're not collecting context information about the products being viewed by an individual user. So a lot of different content gets lumped in with one particular remarketing campaign for every single user that hit the site. So all of those issues fall under that tag management and the need to have everything in line and really robust, documented out, and following those different standards. The final piece here with user trust, and it's shown within the visual here, which I pulled out of our tag inspector tool, data leakage, and then that selling to third parties. It amazes me, and on a daily basis, I'm talking to people, showing them scans of their websites, and them seeing 10, 15, 20 tags. They're like, I have no idea what these are or how it's being introduced in the site. And you can't blame them because it's 3-4 levels deep, and they would have no control over how that's being implemented. And in some cases, even what they're piggybacking off of. So having that visibility, knowing what's going on, and then keeping control over deployment and control over management of the different tags on the site. So everything just can't be thrown on there by anyone in the organization. Everything's properly vetted. We make sure that if there is piggyback going on, it's fully authorized and covered under a data sharing agreement with that particular part. And all that obviously falls under that user trust area. So now we're getting into, obviously it's an issue. Obviously user experience is or can suffer due to poor tag governance, due to poor tag management, due to poor processes. But how do we wrangle this? How do we get control? Two main ways. First, with the tag management policy, and second, with a solid tag management process to follow it up and make sure that tag policy is being followed. So the first piece of a solid tag management policy is you got to know what's going on. You got to know what's going on right now. And what that entails is knowing what platforms are on the site, knowing exactly where they are, and knowing what data is being collected by each. If there is a legacy tool that's only loading on 10% of the pages on my site, I want to know that. I want to know what it is, how it works, what the purpose of it is, who manages it, or who's supposed to own it internally. So that if there is an issue, if it does start blocking other tags from loading, or if it does start affecting user experience, I need to know how exactly to address it. Or if it's not in use, just an old legacy tag, I need it removed. But I need to know where it is, what it's doing, and that I need to know just in general that it's there in order to be able to take those steps. Once understanding what's happening on the site, the second piece of that tag policy is defining what's allowed and what's required. I'm yet to go through a tag audit process with a client and them not have something that they want to remove. Typically, it's, again, something that they have no idea that was there. Typically, it's something that they maybe didn't realize was piggybacking 10, 15, 20 tags off of the back of it. But there's always something jarring that, oh, I thought we got rid of that 2 years ago. Or, oh, why is that still on the site? We're using a competitive product. There's always something, but we need to have, once you have that inventory, go through and identify, yes, this is allowed, this is allowed. And in addition to that, with that tag policy is defining what is required to be there. Certain things, yeah, it's great, that's there, should be there, I'm fine with it being there. We have a data share agreement, we're under contract for the next year. There are other things, such as your web analytics platform, that, as we talked about earlier, are ideally driving the vast majority of decisions of what's happening on the site. How targeting is working, how media is working, and how budget is being allocated. Those things are required. And they're not just required to be there. In many cases, they're required to be collecting certain pieces of information on certain sections. On my transaction page, if I have an e-commerce site, I want to for sure be making sure that I'm collecting that transaction information. I need the transaction ID. I need the transaction total. I need the total revenue. I need tax. I need shipping. I need what products were purchased. All of that information, that's required. That's not a nice to have. Same thing on a content site or on a lead generation site. I need to know what content is driving those form submissions. I need to know what forms are being submitted. I need to know who those individuals are in one way or another. I also need to know how they got there, what content brought them to the site. All of that is, again, around that requirements for location and data points that I need to be collecting in my web analytics platform. Same thing goes for other types of tools. Maybe you're using a testing platform. I need to make sure that that's on all my landing pages so I can make sure that I'm running adequate and sufficient A/B tests and that the results that I'm looking at are actually based on facts and based on what's actually happening and aren't being skewed in one way or another due to a faulty tag implementation. Once you have that inventory, once you have all that information, you define, okay, this is what's allowed, this is what's required, we need to implement change. This is where the removal process comes in. This is where the implementation of the overall governance policy and the tag management policy comes in. In a lot of cases, this is where you'd be migrating to a tag management system. The change process, and then on the tail end of that, once everything is complete, getting into that monitoring and enforcing moving forward. A big part of that is either putting in a manual process or enlisting the help of an automated tool to monitor tags and data collection moving forward, and then have policies and process in place for what to do to remediate. That's where the second piece really comes in with the tag management process. It starts on the front end before a new tag is even added to the site. And that's the process for tag for tag review and approval. And this should include multiple different groups within the organization. It should include security for that data leakage process. What data is being collected? I want to make sure there's no personal PII data being collected by a tag. There's no potential for payment information or demographic, not necessarily demographic information, but personal information about that user being scraped and sent up in one way or another. It's also where legal gets in, where data sharing agreements are put in place. It might be okay for one particular platform to be collecting information, but it's not okay for that same information to be collected by a separate platform due to other security concerns, legal concerns, or just what they need that information for. That's where those data sharing agreements and legal can come in. Finally, the DevOps needs to, and the development team needs to sign off on the different tags being requested and implemented. This goes back to that performance aspect. If there's a particular tag that is handling an unnecessary, or not unnecessary, but not a high leverage function on the site, but yet it is sending up a ton of requests and sending up a ton of information and causing a lot of CPU usage on the user's end and eating up a lot of bandwidth, you might want to look for an alternative, a different platform. You have to have, and the development team is going to know that different trade-off between performance and function when it comes to adding new tags. So it needs to be reviewed and then approved by all those different groups. There also needs to be a process for request and implementation. So how we do this, just an example one. Nothing wants to work for me. I would share it, and I can send it out. I'll throw an example here into the deck when I send this out. But there needs to be the business information when a new tag or a new platform is being requested. Like I mentioned before, I need to know what team's going to be managing it. I need to know who that individual is. I need to know how long that platform should be on the site, so when it should be removed. So in case there is ever an issue, or in case I need to go and address someone about removing the tag, or we're making a slight change to the data layer and the the structure of the data that's going to be pulled in. Is that okay for this platform? I need to know who those individuals are, who the stakeholders are that are working with that particular team, in addition to needing the technical specs for that particular platform. So we have documentation for a tag implementation request documents that we will help clients craft, and we have some templates for that. But you need all that information in one place so that you already have all that documentation down the line, and it feeds into that governance process. So you've already identified what's allowed on the site and what's required. When approving and implementing a new tag, you can go ahead and have all of that as a part of, and collect all that information as a part of that approval process. You can then add it to that overall policy documentation. You have everything moving forward. So that, as well as then on the QA end, post implementation, you know what the requirements are. So what should be collected by this tag? Where should it be? Where should my QA team be looking? And what should they be looking for when making sure that everything is set up properly? Once that initial implementation and review process are complete and everything is on the site, I then need to set up a really solid process around that for ongoing monitoring of all tag behavior. I need to make sure that nothing unauthorized is being introduced, that we're not working with a new partner and we're allowing them to put their own tag management system on the site, which introduces a backdoor outside of our governance and approval process. I need to make sure that none of the partners that we're working with that have their tags implemented are then begin introducing other third parties that are through piggybacking on the site. I also need to make sure that my required tags on an ongoing basis aren't breaking or aren't being negatively affected by other platforms being introduced to the site and are collecting all that information. I need that to be able to be alerted whenever an issue arises. And that's all part of that ongoing monitoring process. So just to get a little bit more in depth, I guess, or more so reiterate, so how to address when it comes to the policy. So what is on the site? That's where it comes down to that tag audit. You can see here on the right-hand side, this is just a very high-level inventory report, but a list of what tag is on there, what is the company, so who is the provider of that particular tag or that platform, what is the category, so what's the purpose, the function of that platform, how should it be loading, should it be managed within my tag management system, is it something that it, like an A/B testing tool, like I mentioned earlier, that's affecting the content on the page, so maybe it needs to be loaded directly from the page source. I also need to know the status. And a lot of these inventory reports we'll try to get into as we identify and start to build that policy with clients. We'll start identifying, okay, how long should this tag be on there, and put dates to it. So we can go ahead and have that documented out. Okay, on this date, this tag gets renewed or removed from the site unless it goes back through that review process or the contract gets renewed, that sort of thing. But it gives constant visibility to what should be on the site, what has to be on the site, and what shouldn't be there, and when things need to change. That's part of that second step of defining standards, defining that policy, and then implementing the change. Now, one thing I talked about a couple of weeks ago in a previous webinar, but I want to just highlight it again here. The need for a tag management system to really simplify this entire process, to implement new tags, to standardize a lot of the data collection that's happening. And then in addition to that, the implementation of a central data layer to standardize format of data, to standardize the data that's being collected, and really normalize all of that to make it simpler and more sustainable for multiple different tags to be collecting information and functioning on the site. Those are crucial to this ongoing process and to simplifying the tag management process. So if you're not leveraging a central data layer, regardless of the tag management system that you're using, I know the format's going to be a little bit different, naming conventions, all that, but the concept is the same, And if you're not using a tag management system, I'd strongly recommend looking into those items. The last part of implementing that change is actually migration of tags. If it's loading through the source code now, but it should be loading through the tag management system, as well as removal and remediation of any issues identified during that audit process. So making sure that there are no gaps in data collection, there are no gaps in coverage, and there are no unauthorized tags, and actually fixing those issues as you come across them through that process. Final piece of the policy, as I mentioned before, monitoring all of that and enforcing the different policies and processes that we have in place. And that can be done manually. If you have resources to manually go through and constantly QA the different tags, or in an automated fashion using a tool such as Tag Inspector, using the different scans for governance and real-time for ongoing data collection validation, as well as some governance work. Second piece here, process. I didn't even realize I had just a screenshot of at least a portion of that implementation request document. But when it comes to processes in this whole tag management area, so tag review and approval, as mentioned before, going through the legal team, security team, development team, these platforms, the introduction of them is typically the requests it's coming from the business. So there should be a legitimate business case for placing a tool on the site. And I always have that business case, so the business use, written into the implementation request document, just so that we always have it there. That allows twofold. One, the business, as opposed to every shiny new tool that comes out, and that we say, oh, I want to try that, or I want to give that a whirl, before actually trying to go through with that. Actually having to think through it. Are we using a platform already that can address the same business need or the same business case that I'm hoping can be addressed with this tool? As well as, do I really need this? Is it really going to help me? Do we have the resources to put forward supporting a platform of this nature? So that's step one, and then going through that full review and approval process, down the line once you have that solid business case already defined. Tag request and implementation, centralized implementation standards. It should be one, individual or team, depending upon the size of your site, just to keep a lot of hands out of the cookie jar, is the best way to put that. So when it comes to solid governance, we don't want to have a lot of different individuals with access to place tags on there, because that's just more areas where issues could arise. So centralizing that process and really locking it down, at least the approval and initial implementation. We've seen this done in a lot of different ways. A lot of clients will use different project management tools. Larger organizations, a lot of them will use tools like Jira. Seen some of our clients will use things like Trello for this process, just as it moves down the line. But there's a lot of different ways that you can go about doing that. But it needs to be documented, and it needs to be formalized and centralized there. And as mentioned before, the tag management system can really simplify that quite a bit. The final piece of the overall process is that ongoing monitoring. And again, we can use a tool such as Tag Inspector to really help and automate that overall process. So to summarize everything from today, as I mentioned, everything on top of just the core site. So all the different marketing technologies, analytics technologies, personalization, all those different third-party tools that are being run on the site to improve user experience and to improve effectiveness of the website, to really drive conversions, drive bottom line. All of that information and all those tools being used are predicated on the tags. That's the foundation. If we don't have a solid tag architecture and a solid tag foundation, and really in practice, everything is not implemented as it should be, collecting all the information it should be, functioning as it should be, the investments we're making in all those different areas are worthless. We can't make accurate decisions, and we can't make confident decisions. People within the organization, within the business, won't trust the data and trust the decisions being made unless, again, that tag architecture is complete and the actual data collection is accurate. So all of that, it's key to have that locked down and to have standards surrounding that. At the same time, it poses the risk of data leakage, security issues, as well as any situations that might arise in poor user experience. So tags can definitely affect page performance, site performance, which then in turn affects your conversion rates and the bottom line there. So it's extremely, extremely important to take ownership and really get a grasp on what's going on the site through those tag processes, and then as well as implementing those different tag policies that we went through. Any questions at all? It's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover today. Let's take a look. It doesn't look like we have anything coming in just yet, which is fine. Okay. If no questions at all, that is perfectly fine. We'll get out of here a few minutes early. I just wanted to thank everyone again for joining us here today. I know it's a busy week for a lot of folks, but yeah, thanks for joining us. We'll be sending out the recording here probably tomorrow would be my thought, if not beginning part of next week. So be on the lookout for that. We have another Tag Inspector training webinar next week where we'll just be going through some of the functionality of the tool. So if you're a user of Tag Inspector already, definitely join us for that. But yeah, let me know if anyone has any questions. And thanks very, very much for joining us, and have a great Thanksgiving week.